Hello, welcome to this Base 3 video. Today I'm going to be talking about the worst mistakes I made as head coach of British powerlifting. Okay, so for a bit of background first, I was an international powerlifter and I competed at 2 IPF Classic Worlds, one in 2014 in South Africa and one in 2015 in Finland. I then retired from lifting and moved into the GB coaching setup. 2018, I was made head coach of the British Powerlifting's Classic team that competed in the IPF. And 2018 World Championships in Canada was my first actual run as head coach. So I'm going to start with mistake number 1 of the top 3 biggest ones. And that actually happened in 2019 in Sweden, in Helsingborg. And I think it's important to try and learn from most of these mistakes. And I would say that even though this was what I would say a very near miss, it meant that I changed my coaching strategy moving forward. And what happened was we had a 63 kilogram female lifter who was competing, and she'd done her squats and she was starting in the bench press. We'd done all her warm-ups, and I think, if I remember rightly, on a couple of her warm-ups, her bum was lifting off the bench, but we managed to fix that. Her coach was also there. And so when you're coaching internationally, a lot of the time, the lifters you're working with aren't the lifters that you coach on a day-to-day basis. They're people that you are there just to handle and look after. And their coach has developed a plan or a system and has handed that over to you. And sometimes they'll be watching along at home and they'll try and message. Most of the time we discourage that. But they've given you a plan. Now, in some cases, the coaches are actually also on the GB coaching team. And in this case, her coach was backstage with her warming up and helping advise. I was still the one handling the attempts with the slips. So I was still the one ultimately responsible for every attempt that went in. She'd done her opening bench at 90 kilograms and she beat the press command. And what that means is you get the 3 commands in the bench press: start, press and rack. And she'd pressed before they'd said press. Happens occasionally, nerves, things like that. But it moved really quickly. And normally, if a lifter misses their opening lift, you've got 2 choices. You either just take it again, so in which case you've lost a lift, or you jump up a bit. Now, rarely do you go to your normal second, the one that's pre-planned. Normally you'll go somewhere in between. So her plan was to go 90, 95, then I think 97.5 or 100 for her third. So 90 had moved well, having beaten the press command. My initial instinct was to either go 90 or 92.5. Now, normally you're waiting for when the lifter comes off the platform to just double check with them. She wanted to go straight to 95. And I was like, oh, I don't know about that. And her coach was like, honestly, she's got it. Absolutely 100%. The junior head coach was actually sitting in the front row of the crowd and was right next to me. And I glanced over at him and he actually gestured as if to say, yeah, come on, she's got it. So I'm going to throw him under the bus right away. That's Jason. And the 3 of them all convinced me to go to 95, which was against my better judgment. So I wrote it down, took it to the desk. Once the attempt's handed in, that's it. There's no going back. Went backstage, her turn comes around again, gets underneath, 95. She ground it out and only just got it. It was a slow rep. And my hands are on my knees, my head was down. And when I saw those 3 white lights, I was so relieved because obviously it was my decision to go up to 95. I let her put that attempt in. And if she'd missed it and then probably missed the third, that was it. She would have bombed out of an international competition and it would have been my fault. So the lesson I learned there was not to let other people's opinions affect my judgment. When you're the chief handler for a lifter, it is all down to you. And the vast majority of the time, your gut instinct is the correct instinct. So that's mistake number 1. Okay, mistake number 2 is actually when I was handling a junior lifter, not a senior lifter. So years ago, the opens and the juniors used to lift at the same worlds and Europeans together before they split them off. So what would happen is the juniors would lift earlier on in the week or just the week before, and I'd go out and help the junior team before then working with the seniors. Now the junior team's in many ways harder because the lifters are less experienced, and also there are more of them. Like you've got sub-juniors and juniors together. They often require a bit more work. So it's a tough gig doing the juniors. It's probably harder than coaching the seniors to a certain extent. And it was with a young female lifter, and it was involved in the warm-ups for deadlift. Now, sometimes it's quite hard to get the timings of warm-ups exactly right. You've got to be watching the whole time of how the previous flight is going, how long you think you've got before your lifter starts, how many of you there are in the back sharing a rack, what the attempts you've got for warm-ups are written down. And basically I misjudged this lifter's warm-ups, meaning that we were getting too close to her going out to lift, and I judged to skip the final warm-up for deadlifts. What ended up happening was she went out onto the platform and just didn't get her opener. It just was stapled to the floor, didn't move. And this girl's deadlift was her main weapon. This was her big lift. And she walked off the stage and she looked at me shocked and was like, I don't know what happened. Now, normally, if someone misses a deadlift and an opener, it's because it's a technical issue. They've wobbled at the top or something, their grip's gone, anything. But she'd failed on strength. And normally if someone fails an opener on strength, that is it. There's no coming back from that. So I thought, what can we do? So we actually went, it was a reasonably large flight, straight into the back. And I worked out there was about 11 minutes before she was going to go again. So after 5 minutes, we took her last deadlift warm-up then, which moved okay. She then went out for her second, got it, which was the same weight as her opener, and then went up another 15 kilos and got that as well. So in the end, it actually worked out fine. She was happy. She got a total she was proud of, but it was such a basic error to make. And that at that stage, I'd had so many lifters where they get their opener and it's comfortable and you almost get blasé about it. And I thought, goodness, I need to make sure in future these warm-ups are timed. And if we're going to miss any of the warm-ups, we miss the lighter ones and not the heavy one. So it's a learning point. It's a teaching point. You move forward and you absorb that into the process you use. And from then on, I always made sure that the last warm-up was taken in plenty of time. Final one, mistake number 3. So in both those previous mistakes, I was the chief handler. I was the one responsible. I had the attempt slips. It was all down to me. Now, the third one actually is from a slightly different perspective. I was not the chief handler. I was the supporting handler. And this means that I'm there basically not quite as a dog's body. That's a bit derogatory for that term, but there to help the chief handler. I'm there to support them, do the maths on the score sheet, double check their opinions on things and just check everything's going okay, loading the bar for the warm-up attempts. But you're also there as like a safety zone, just to double check. And this lifter was the chief handler for this lifter was their coach and partner. So that there, you've got a can of worms there, because that's quite a complicated relationship going on. And as the supportive handler, I should have been more aware of that. And what happened was, for this lifter's last deadlift, their second deadlift was hard and they wanted a big jump to their last deadlift. And they were convinced that that's what they could get. Now, I knew they weren't going to get it, but they wanted this number. I think it was 200 kilos and it should have been more like 192, 195. But the handler, because they were the coach in the relationship and all these things, they were too close and they let the lifter make the call. What I should have done as a supporting handler is stepped in and been the voice of reason, if you like, and said, look, I don't think that's the best decision. I think you should do this. If the lifter had then been absolutely still convinced, fine. I'd have done my job and that would have been fine. But I didn't do that. I didn't get involved. And actually afterwards, I went and apologised. He's a friend of mine, the guy that was handling. And I said, mate, I'm sorry, I should have stepped in then and helped you out. I didn't. I let you take it, and I stayed out of it. It's like not my business, except it should have been my business. So those are my 3 biggest mistakes. There are other things that happened when I was head coach. There's probably people watching going, what about when you put this attempt in or that attempt in and they didn't get it? Those sort of things I don't necessarily consider mistakes. You take decisions based on the information you have at the time and you come up with a decision. And if you can satisfy that was the correct decision with the information you had at the time, it's not a mistake. Okay. It's easy to be a couch coach. It's a bit like a backseat driver, to sit at home watching it on the score sheet going, they should have got that. Or looking at the score sheet after a competition going, well, why didn't they put this in? Because you're not there. You're not there at the time. You're not seeing what that coach sees. And it might sound crazy, but it's very different watching a lift in person than it is watching it on the live stream. There is something different about being there. You get more of a feel for how difficult a lift is than the person watching on the live stream. All right. So I would always give the benefit of the doubt to the handler that is there at the time. Sometimes you see obvious errors where most of the time it's a maths mistake. They've just added something wrong and put the wrong attempt in. Obviously, those are mistakes. But most of the time, it's you make your best call at the time. If it doesn't work out, that's just how it goes. Thank you very much. The next video in this series will probably be the 3 worst things I've seen that weren't my fault. And that might be less humbling to record. If you're interested in finding out more about Base 3 and how my coaching can help you get stronger, please click on the link in the description. Thank you very much.